I know. Hold on. No. I know the theme song. It goes Spider-Man, Spider-Man. Everybody gets one.
Wow.
What's up, everybody? My name is MichaelStephenson. Welcome to my YouTube channel. You are currently watching my art/entertainment industry series in which I talk about the art/entertainment industry and what is going wrong. It's called Hollywoodisbroken, as you can see. For those of you who are new here, I would ask that you please go back and watch some of my opening videos. They're all labeled episodes. I ask that you do that because I was trying to establish a particular lingo/language here on the channel so that I have a shorthand going forward with you, the viewers, and so that you know and understand things like the Avatar era, the Lost effect, what those terms are, what they mean. I have whole videos on them. So I ask again that you please go back and watch those videos. So you see the title of the video, you see the picture, and I know I'm going to get some flack for this, but it has to be said. Number one, I don't think that this is clickbait, but I will say this. I absolutely believe that Spider-Man, even though, yes, he has made a crap ton of money for both Sony and Marvel, I feel like he's a problem. I feel like he's definitely a big problem for the current MCU. So first off, let me back up and say this. It is of my opinion that no, this is not clickbait, or it's not a clickbaity title, mainly because my whole idea of clickbait has always been if somebody makes a title or makes a video that they don't fully believe in, they just make it to rile people up. But like, yeah, you can tell that they don't really believe in that particular thing. And oftentimes their arguments are incredibly weak. This is not that. I've made maybe one or two clickbait videos in my life. I guess you can say that the Breaking Bad commercial thing, and that's down there. That was a commercial for my own writing. So you could say that I was clickbaity. But almost every other video, no. I truly believe what I'm saying here. And I believe what I'm saying here for the Spider-Man. So there's so many things that we can mention about Spider-Man. And most of these things I'm just going to try to touch on. I'm going to try to make this video fairly quick, fairly simple. Because honestly, I chose Dune Part 1 as the example of almost everything wrong with current Hollywood. That movie, I think, captures a lot of what is really wrong with Hollywood now. But thinking on it, Spider-Man, specifically the Marvel MCU Spider-Man, kind of has a lot of the same problems. Now, let me be clear about this. Dune Part 1 has far more problems than Spider-Man, than any of the Spider-Man films. But Spider-Man does have a few of the same things. It does share in a few of the same problems overall within the industry. But I like Spider-Man a lot, even though I don't particularly like this specific version of him. So I'm like, yeah, I didn't choose Spider-Man to be that quintessential film of everything wrong with Hollywood. But there's a lot. So first off, I think that one of the biggest things on why Spider-Man is probably the big problem in the MCU right now is because of the fact that I think Spider-Man alone is almost fueling a certain level of superhero fatigue. Now, let me be clear about this. I don't think that we are going to get superhero fatigue so much or to such a point to where we no longer have superhero films. That's not going to happen. It's just like with Westerns and stuff. We're going to ebb and flow. In this ebb and flow, we're just going to go through various eras in which sometimes we have a lot of superhero films, sometimes we have little superhero films. But I do think that the fact that we have seen Spider-Man so much, it seems like we get a Spider-Man film, and I think we actually have gotten a Spider-Man film or a Spider-Man appearance, whether that is the live action TomHolland version or an animated version of Spider-Man, pretty much every single year since 2016. That's just way too much Spider-Man. Oh my God. I mean, it's way too much Spider-Man. Again, I just don't even know where to go with that. So we first start with seeing Spider-Man in 2016, Captain America: Civil War. Then we see him in 2017 in his own film, Spider-Man: Homecoming. Then we see him again in 2018, Spider-Man, I almost called it Spider-Man Infinity War, in Avengers Infinity War. We see him again in 2019, Avengers Endgame. We see him two times, in fact, in 2019, Endgame, and then Spider-Man Far From Home. And then we see him again in 2021 in No Way Home. The fact that we see him, what is that, 5 different times in as many years, I know that he is an incredibly popular character, but it almost feels like at this point he has been used to exhaustion. Goodness gracious. I mean, even now, and it's been 3 years since 2021. Now, granted, it hasn't been a full 3 years. It's really, 2 years and 3-4 months, because it came out, Spider-Man No Way Home came out in December of 2021. And also, granted, I only actually just saw Spider-Man No Way Home on regular TV, on FX. I never saw it in the theaters. But even now, still, I'm still kind of exhausted from seeing this Spider-Man. He just feels like he's almost everywhere all the time. And yet still somehow, he still feels like he wouldn't be a good choice to lead the next Avengers team. Somehow, you would think that with him having so many appearances in the MCU, that his character would have developed to such an extent that it would seem like he would be the de facto leader of the next Avengers team. But no, it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like the character has progressed to that level of maturity, which leads me to the next point. And I've already made this point in another video. Check out my timelines video of why the current MCU is really just having a hard time with its timelines. And that is the reason why he probably doesn't feel like he could lead the next Avengers, is because of the fact that he's still a boy. Look, in those 5 years that we saw him in the different movies, maybe somewhere around 3 years have passed. This is, of course, taking out the 5-year gap in which he was dusted from Endgame. Okay, 3 years of his life we've seen have passed. He's not a leader because he's still very much so a boy. Not to mention the fact that from a logistical standpoint within the MCU, it feels very much so like he's almost, weirdly enough, I guess a time suck or a time drain. It's strange. The fact that Far From Home and No Way Home happened within the same year. Yes, they are two. The films were released 2 years apart, but they happened in the same year. We know that they do because the ending of Far From Home is the beginning of No Way Home. And then No Way Home doesn't even cover a full year. It covers only up to Christmas of the same year of Far From Home. The fact that happens, I feel like it throws off the current MCU timelines to where anything that is said to, and this is also why I'm very intrigued for Spider-Man No Way Home to finally come onto Disney Plus. For those of you who don't know or who don't have it all the time, Disney Plus has a Marvel Cinematic Universe official timeline category in which they list all of the MCU films and TV shows in order of how they should be watched according to the timeline within the MCU. I'm intrigued to see where Spider-Man No Way Home fits on that, because it very much so feels like a lot of stuff seems to have happened between their release of Far From Home and No Way Home. But again, there hasn't been a whole lot of time that has lapsed. On top of that, even now you have the fact that since the last Spider-Man movie No Way Home released, in the real world, it'll be probably somewhere around 4 years between No Way Home and the next Spider-Man film. They still have yet to even start filming on the next Spider-Man film at all, which means that the earliest it can release is sometime in late 2025, meaning that basically since the last film released, someone could go to college and have earned pretty much their entire degree, bachelor's degree, in the amount of time between that. Which leads me sort of to the next point. The fact that we have seen the Spider-Man character only in high school, and he only has just now graduated into high school. Oh God, I just feel like every other character seems to be progressing in multiple ways, but his character, Spider-Man Peter Parker, has not really progressed in almost any way. Yes, you can say, oh, but what about all the different emotional cues and stuff that he's had to go through, all this emotional growth? I don't know. It kind of just seems moot at this point because I just there's something about the character that doesn't seem quite developed, even to what we've seen other Peter Parkers as. He doesn't feel like a fully developed character, even for a teenager. Yeah, I just don't know. There always seems like there's something missing in this particular Peter Parker that was not missing in the other Peter Parkers. Now, maybe it is the fact that he hasn't that unlike the other Peter Parkers, he hasn't really struggled, which is something that is inherent within the character from the comic books, that Peter is a long-suffering kind of average Joe superhero. This Peter is almost somewhat of a spoiled rich kid. I mean, let's keep it real. Yes, he himself is not rich, but when you have Tony Stark taking a personal interest in you and giving you almost the keys to the castle in some ways, giving you all sorts of tech, I'm sure that he's giving you some money in there somewhere as well. It's kind of hard to see him as the true Peter Parker. He feels like some other formation or formulation that shouldn't really exist. Unfortunately, he just doesn't feel like he should feel. Then, speaking of the plotting for Spider-Man, oh golly, I just don't know. I feel like one of the reasons why, weirdly enough, the MCU Spider-Man is kind of my most hated Spider-Man. I don't like him at all, really. Is that I feel like every single time he has a movie, the plot, there are just so many plot strands that basically get left out in the open and kind of never fully explained, and or the writers write themselves into a corner. Now, me being a writer myself, I can tell you that there are good times, or there are good instances of writing one's self into a corner, and there are bad instances of doing that. So a good instance of writing oneself into a corner is when you as a writer, you write yourself into a corner and you think, oh God, there's so many actions that can be taken here that I could potentially go with. I could use this particular kind of device. I can use this particular kind of device. And all of those things would be super captivating to an audience. The bad kind of writing oneself into a corner is when you know that you've written yourself into a corner that is ultimately going to destroy a large part of the quote-unquote resonance or emotional payoff of the audience. Now, please go back and watch my video on resonances. There's narrative, thematic, emotional. Those are the big three. So that I don't have to explain resonance points again. But the fact of, number one, the way that Far From Home in and of itself was dealt with is kind of strange. I don't know if any of you know this or even remember it, but did we ever actually solve that Mysterio thing? Because in No Way Home, one of the things that was a big deal in No Way Home is that the public turned against Spider-Man because they thought that Mysterio died a hero. And before the rest of the plot, you know, the villains being brought over from different universes and what have you, before that overtakes the film, I don't ever remember them solving in any way, shape, or form that Mysterio problem. That to me is just like a plot point to which they either, it's a plot hole or they just dropped it, or maybe it'll come back. I don't know. But is Mysterio still considered a hero and he died a hero? Does anybody have the answer to that? Because I feel like the movie definitely didn't do anything to try to answer that. But then even more to the point, the fact that the way in which the film ends, in many ways, him giving up, him turning away from his friends, and basically, I guess, allowing for them to have a life to where they don't know him. On some level, it's this emotional payoff because I guess it's sort of him realizing that maybe they're better without him. But then also, it's weird because, number one, isn't it like it isn't the lesson that he learned from the Spider-Man, specifically Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, who, they talked about how he had an MJ. They talked about how he tried to give up and let go and all this stuff. But he and MJ somehow still made it work, even with all the troubles and the toils and stuff that they had to go through. Isn't the ending like, isn't he undercutting that lesson that he learned there? It just feels very much so like they kind of didn't really know what to do there. So they were just like, yeah, let's just put this ending in there. Because we've seen Peter Parker and we've seen Tobey Maguire, of course, and we've also seen Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man try to give up Gwen Stacy. We've seen them try to give up their loves before, ultimately for that not to work and for them to come back to them within the same film. Here, though, it feels different because they end the film that way, and instead of allowing for it to be somewhat of a mutual choice, mutual decision between both parties, between Peter and MJ, or between Peter and his best friend, it almost ends on a selfish note to where Peter makes this selfish decision himself to say, yeah, no, I'm just going to let them live the rest of their lives. To me, this is the writers have written themselves into a corner because of the fact that if they now renege on this promise that Peter himself has sort of set up to where he's going to allow them to live their own life, is that going to be a good payoff later on for the audience? Is it going to give good emotional resonance for the audience that now they know again after you spent this whole movie going back and forth of should they know him, should they not, is it too dangerous, is it not, and he ultimately decides, yeah, it probably is too dangerous, I'm just going to leave him. Then you're going to go back on that. It just kind of feels like you wasted an entire film, almost like the film No Way Home was a bit of a nothing burger because he ultimately decides kind of the same thing that I just don't want anybody to know who I am. I didn't particularly care for the ending going forward, considering that the two actors, Zendaya and I don't even know the other dude's name. I'm keeping real fresh and funky with you. Considering that they're supposed to be coming back for another Spider-Man, why? Just let them be. They shouldn't be in the next Spider-Man. Move on with another character. Have him not end up with MJ in this one. As soon as you bring them into the next one, all it's going to do is undercut everything that you've established in the previous film. It's going to undercut any kind of emotional impact that you had in that film. Any of it. I think that, again, this is something that is being set up. Sorry, if I didn't make this clear before, let me make this clear now. The things that I am pointing out in Spider-Man, a lot of these problems are problems not just that I'm seeing in Spider-Man, but they are problems that are being played out, in my opinion, across the current MCU. So I feel as if the emotional undercutting of a lot of these different characters and whatnot I feel like that is happening throughout the MCU in a lot of different other things, in a lot of different movies and a lot of different TV shows, that this same sort of undercutting is happening. So the way that the Sony and Marvel contract is set up is that it seems very much so like Marvel constantly needs to be pumping out Spider-Man content and Spider-Man centric movies or movies featuring Spider-Man, at least, much so even to the detriment of their own fully owned characters. Again, it feels like Spider-Man takes precedent over every other character in the MCU, which is why he has had so many films and why he has had probably more appearances than I want to say that he's probably had more appearances as a comic book character than literally any other comic book character in comic book film history. Like in the short span of time that he has been in the MCU, again, he's appeared so many different times. It's kind of unreal. Yeah, it was just such a very short amount of time. And it very much so does seem like it is to the detriment of other characters. Now, listen, again, I know how the business works. I know that not every single writer in the Marvel company is writing, or that's contracted. Y'all know what I mean. Is writing on Spider-Man, right? So yes, they can have multiple films being written on and worked on at the same time. However, the fact of the matter is that it seems like a Spider-Man movie needs to always be in development. And because of that, because they have to have a constant and continuous Spider-Man writer's room, that is detrimental to other characters because of the fact that they can't, that money that could be allocated to hiring good writers for other new characters or other characters in general, probably some of it has to be allocated to Spider-Man instead. So who knows what kind of movie we may have gotten if the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness movie was not only not changed because its release date was changed in favor of a more favorable release date for Spider-Man, or the CGI was pushed back because the CGI studios, they had a lot of CGI to work with on their own dockets and all that stuff, or what kind of movie the Eternals might have been had they gotten a better writing team because less money had to go to, or no money had to go to, the next Spider-Man movie, and they could hire better writers or something like that. We will never know any of that because Spider-Man is somewhat of a resource suck. I mean, God, it just feels almost like everything is starting to center around Spider-Man. Even more to the point, it's weird to me because I constantly am coming back to this thought these days that as much as the Sony Spider-Verse needs Spider-Man, they are suffering from a lack of Spider-Man in the Sonyverse with Madam Web and Morbius and all these films that they're doing. As much as they need Spider-Man is how little the MCU currently needs Spider-Man. And yet the MCU is constantly pushing Spider-Man all the time. To me, also, another problem, and like I said, I'm trying to go fast because this is like a general problem type of thing. A lot of this stuff will have its own video later on. But I feel like this is a problem that is also cited for me with the whole purchase of Fox and the reclamation of the rights for X-Men and Fantastic Four. And that is that because Sony and Marvel came to this agreement and they were like, yeah, you can have Spider-Man, blah, blah, blah. It feels in some ways like Marvel then started the process of shoehorning Spider-Man in to the MCU. Now, of course, now we are years into it, so he's more than shoehorned in. He's natural within the universe. But in the same way that he felt almost shoehorned in to Civil War, and there was maybe 8 or even 13 minutes of that film that could probably be cut if he wasn't in the film and it was just Black Panther. But no, they went out of their way, like, oh man, we got Spider-Man, so now we have to fit him into the film really quickly. Let's do it. And it did feel kind of natural, although it also felt weird and just like, what? It's like, oh yeah, Tony Stark is just going to go out of his way to find a teenage boy with superpowers and then just have him fight other more experienced superheroes who have literally killed before. Like, sure, they might not have killed humans, but they've definitely killed aliens. Like, yeah, that makes sense. Again, we all just went along with it because we were so excited to see Spider-Man in the MCU, but narratively, it's like, this dude is just way too irresponsible. Like, Tony Stark, he's way too freaking irresponsible. And pushing that aside, I'm concerned that the MCU is kind of doing the same exact thing with the mutants, with the X-Men and Fantastic Four. It almost feels like they are sort of pushing to shoehorn them in super quickly, which, as I mentioned in my Kang video, is one of the reasons why I think they even went with the time jumping / multiverse villain of Kang, because they really want to get their mutants into the MCU really quickly, and they think that this is the only way to do it. Using this idea to write characters into the universe really, really quickly almost feels like you're shoving them into the universe before they really even need to be in there. And I felt a little bit like that with Spider-Man, and now I'm feeling kind of like that with X-Men and Fantastic Four, to where it's just like, yeah, they feel that there's a rush, there's this need to push those out. And I'm like, oh man, please don't. Take your time with it. Take more time to build up to that, and don't do what you did with Spider-Man. then of course there's, and maybe I'll end on this because there's a few other Spider-Man things that are a bit troublesome to me about the Spider-Man character and how they're treating him. But I feel in many ways that Spider-Man is just, I think one of the biggest things, one of the biggest problems with the current Spider-Man is that, and this of course is the problem with the MCU, and obviously I think that all the executives know this. It's clear that the actors know this. Anthony Mackie came out and said it almost a decade ago now, that it still has not created real stars. So outside of the fact that Spider-Man himself, the character, does not feel like he could lead an Avengers team, as opposed to like a young Avengers team, outside of the fact that he still doesn't feel mature enough to do that. Looking at Tom Holland, he's not a star, unfortunately. He's had multiple years to really turn his Spider-Man role to push that into stardom, and he hasn't been able to. And the worst thing to me is not even that he's not a star, but that from everything I see, and I have a whole nother video in which I talk about Tom Holland. And as an aside, let me say this. I also have a video, I haven't released it yet, but it is on jealousy. Because let me be honest, am I jealous of Tom Holland? Yes, I have a crush on Zendaya. I would love to steal Zendaya from him. Maybe I shouldn't have said it that way. Well, I've already said it now. I have a crush on Zendaya. Let's just leave it at that. I'm also jealous of him professionally. I would love to be in the MCU. I've said it before. I will say it again in every one of these videos. I would love to play Kang the Conqueror, or at least get an audition or an interview discussing the character. I think I can also write within the MCU. So yes, I am jealous. I am not going to sugarcoat that at all. I'm not going to try to hide from it. I am upfront with my jealousy. With that being said, even in my jealousy, I try to be as logical and I try to be as logical and forthcoming with what I see as possible as I possibly can be. And looking at it, it almost feels in some ways like both Sony and Marvel, when they cast this new Spider-Man, it almost feels in some ways like they knew that they should cast either a weaker actor or someone who never had the threat of becoming bigger than the character, who actually had the threat of ever becoming a star. And to me, this is actually shown up as a big problem within the Spider-Man films, but also in the wider MCU. Now, listen, don't get me wrong. To caveat this, the whole point of the deal that Sony made with Marvel is to have and to benefit from the fact that Spider-Man is, in fact, in the MCU. So I fully and wholly understand. And as a business person, putting my business hat on, I wholly agree with the fact that, yeah, I want as many Marvel MCU cameos as I can possibly get into my Spider-Man film. However, the fact of the matter is that I think one of the reasons as to why this Spider-Man, in my opinion, feels so weak, and it also has not done anything or very little for Tom Holland's career going forward as like a legitimate movie star, because he definitely isn't, is because of the fact that they never allow for him to actually lead a Spider-Man film. Yes, he is the titular character, but can he really stand alone in any of the films? Because he definitely hasn't yet. Again, think about this. With the other Spider-Man, with both Tobey Maguire and with Andrew Garfield, for the most part, they were pretty much the most famous person within their own films. You think about Tobey Maguire in that first Spider-Man film. Who did he have in that film that was more famous than he was? That was somebody who was coming there that supported or held up the entire movie all by themselves. Kind of no one. You can make the argument that Kirsten Dunst was maybe more famous than him, although I would say that their levels were on par. But by the time he got Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man film, he had at the very least done Pleasantville, and I think he already had done Cider House Rules as well. So he had already been in some stuff, and wasn't he in? Correct me if I'm wrong. I probably am wrong on this, but I feel like he and his best friend Leo DiCaprio I feel like they were in the movie Basketball Diaries together, or it probably, maybe it was some other movie. I don't know. I'm not sure. But in any case, Tobey Maguire was a young actor who he had already built up a legitimate resume to where people were looking at him like, wow, he could really be something. Kirsten Dunst, same thing. She had been in Jumanji, but then she was also in Interview with the Vampire, right? So she had a good resume to her. Outside of that, though, there weren't any other super famous people that appeared in that film to bolster it, or to have the film rely on them as opposed to Toby, or as opposed to Toby and Kirsten. Yes, you can argue that, well, what about William Dafoe? Yeah, he had been in some interesting films, but he wasn't nearly the kind of legitimate star that people would actually go to the theaters to be like, oh man, I gotta see this William Dafoe film. No. And in fact, you can argue even today that most of his fame comes from the fact that he was in the Spider-Man movies. And of course, I'm leaving out, the other guy. He's had some bad behavior, so let's not really mention his name. But he also wasn't a star, right? He did 1 season of Freaks and Geeks, a show which was canceled pretty quickly. So it wasn't like he was a star himself. And even throughout the majority of the rest of the franchise, there was nobody who came in that was really bigger than Tobey Maguire, or even on the same level. Alfred Molina wasn't even, like, you can still argue that he's not really a star, and he definitely wasn't a star then. So then you go to Andrew Garfield's version of Spider-Man, and yes, in the first film, you could say that he probably stood alone as the biggest celebrity there. Yes, you could still say, well, Emma Stone, she had done Zombieland, and that was a sleeper hit, so to speak, but he was still bigger than her even after his Social Network thing. And Dennis Leary, were they coming to the theaters to see him? No, not really. And I can't even remember the name of the dude who played the Lizard. I can't even remember his name. I know he's a British actor. That's all I know. Now, in the second one, you can argue that, yes, Andrew Garfield was outshined by Jamie Foxx. And then, of course, he also had Paul Giamatti as well as B.J. Novak as Alistair to contend with. But mostly it was just Jamie Foxx was probably the biggest star out of those Amazing Spider-Man films. Andrew Garfield was basically left to hold up the entire Spider-Man franchise himself, along with a little assist from Emma Stone. Tom Holland's Spider-Man is weak, not just in the narrative, but he's weak in that it feels very much so like everybody knows that Tom Holland is not a star and that he might never be a star, because they've never allowed for him to even halfway hold up any singular film that he's been in as the titular character. The first film, do you even need to mention Iron Man? Robert Downey Jr. is just right there. And even if you don't have Robert Downey Jr., you still then have Michael Keaton as Vulture. So it's like, did you really come to see Tom Holland, or did you come to see these other two with a little bit of Spider-Man? And you could have thrown anybody into that role, and it still would have been good. It still would have been a big movie, etc. Second film, again, you had Nick Fury in a completely superfluous role. Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. He didn't even need to be in the film, and yet for some reason he was stuffed in there just because. And on top of that, as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't like and this is yet again another weird plot point to me that is being dropped. He also knew that Mysterio was the villain, right? Didn't he also know? Why did he not come out and clear Peter Parker's name and say, nah, actually Mysterio was a bad dude, etc., etc.? I don't understand that. It just makes no sense. But he didn't even need to be in the movie to begin with. And then he turned out to be a Skrull, and it's like, okay, I guess that's something. But even if you take Samuel L. Jackson out of the movie, you still have, what's his name? Jake Gyllenhaal there. Way bigger star than Tom Holland is. And then, the third movie, we don't even need to mention it, right? This is packed with so many stars that it's just like Tom Holland has never been left to make a Spider-Man, to have a standalone Spider-Man film where the film depends just on him and his potential star power alone. He's never had that for any of the Spider-Man. So no wonder the Spider-Man films in and of themselves, to me, feel kind of weak. And no wonder they have not made him a star. I feel like this is, again, is a big problem for the MCU and for Hollywood in general, mainly because of the fact that at this point in time, you know, Marvel is kind of getting into, well, technically, some can and do argue that Iron Man and Captain America and Thor were B level. They were B tier superheroes to begin with, and that Spider-Man was always an A tier. And then you maybe had X-Men, specifically Wolverine, was also an A tier superhero within the catalog. But going forward through the MCU, I feel like we're going to be seeing more B and C and maybe even D tier superheroes trying to lead their own thing, right? We had Moon Knight, for goodness sake. I feel like at this point, you're going to be seeing some things which, especially now that people are talking about superhero fatigue, people are talking about how the MCU is sort of overextended. I feel like you need to have stars that can sell these movies. And the fact that, again, yes, I still believe that the movies can make stars, which is why I'm lobbying for Kang. I think that it's a great role. I think that I am a star. I really do. I know some of y'all are going to laugh at that and think that it's ridiculous, but again, just wait to the future. I'm almost certain that I am. I'm putting it out into the world that I am. And you have to put out positivity into the world, right? But there's just something off about the fact that Spider-Man hasn't been able to do any of that. I feel like Spider-Man in and of itself, and the way that they are treating the characters and the films that they have, are in some ways a microcosm of the bigger picture of things that are slowly but surely going wrong within the MCU. That's pretty much my point to this, okay? So I think I've said pretty much all that I wanted to say in this video. Again, this is sort of supposed to be an overview video. I didn't want to make it too long. I'll talk about Tom Holland and all that stuff in another video. I'll have a Tom Holland video. I also have a few Zendaya videos as well. But yeah, I think that Spider-Man, weirdly enough, even though he's successful, even though he's a great character, even though, I used to like his movies, I feel like he's one of the biggest problems with the MCU right now. I do. Okay. I don't have a sign off. Hey everybody. So while I don't have an official sign off yet, I guess I should do the whole please like, comment, share, and if you so desire and you want to see more, subscribe. But more importantly, I will ask that you please go and purchase one of my books. They are mostly ebooks, and pretty much they are all under $10. See if any of my work is actually any good, if it lives up to any of the things that I'm talking about here on my channel, specifically with the entertainment industry videos. So please go purchase my books. All of my links are down below. Thank you.